The real problem became how to slow down. The art of hot rodding had become a science. Big time, big bucks. But it had all begun with the high school bad boys, with a set of socket wrenches and a pocket full of change.
I won't say we were nerds, but we were just kind of, we liked things that went fast. We all have our different ways of self-expression. Well, this was ours. It's the guy who has the fastest chariot.
They cut a place out in the open field and started racing on Sundays. This was actually the beginning of stock car racing down.
(1960). John F. Kennedy was about to move into the White House. Elvis was in the Army, and 12,000 fans packed the new super speedway at Daytona Beach, Florida. Stock car racing was becoming a big-time sport. With 500 horses under each hood, it was like football on four wheels. The attraction was that people could watch the cars they drove every day. Fords, Chevys, and Plymouths. Out on the track, going 150 miles per hour. It was on the back roads of the rural South that drivers like Junior Johnson, Buck Baker, and Buddy Schumann learned their trade. Racing on the wrong side of the law.
That looks like a car. Sure does. We'll step on it.
For decades, they'd been hauling moonshine and trying to steer clear of government agents like Joe Carter, who'd been sent in to stop them.
Well, I considered it a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of danger in it. Some of the kids up there knew every curve in the county and how much speed they could take it at under certain weather conditions.
Most of the drivers were teenagers. They go down a 16-foot wide road and do a complete 180 by spinning the car. If you could do that, you were a good moonshine driver.
The 1958 movie Thunder Road became a cult favorite, depicting bootlegging as a romantic, action-packed business. The truth was a lot less glamorous. Bootlegging was dangerous, but the money earned by a successful run could make the difference between eating and going hungry.
Honey, everybody was poor. Back in those days, there just wasn't any money.
That's why there were so many families that had bootleggers in their families. They were starving to death, and you were living on cornbread and beans, and I mean, that's all you could afford.
In Tim Flock's family, a backwoods still kept food on the table for a family of 9.
Well, a couple of times, my two brothers would take me up in the North Georgia mountains to see how moonshine liquor was made. But it was a real hard job and a real hard way to make a living.
Making corn whiskey without getting caught was the first trick. Getting it to market was the next. The key to success was a car that would not attract attention.
You could put between 100 and 180 gallons on a 39 Ford when they had everything stripped out except a bucket seat.
On the outside, a bootlegger's car looked like any other. But inside were hundreds of mason jars filled with white lightning.
It's almost unbelievable how much they could put in on a car. Now, you couldn't do that in an ordinary car because it would drag the ground, but they put in, sometimes spend $1,000 just putting extra supports and airlifts and overload springs under the back.
And they'd be up like this, going up in the mountains, and when they put a load of liquor on it, they'd come back down.
The most important part of a bootlegger's car was under the hood. Hopped-up engines could carry the load and then some. The federal agents, known as revenuers, were stuck with government-issued economy cars.
Give it all you can.
It wasn't much of a contest. Guys pass you up at 150 miles an hour. You can't make 80. It's kind of a hopeless situation.
A revenuer's best hope was to get his hands on a bootlegger's car.
The best car I ever drove was one we'd seized from this Willie Clay Calls. It had 2 full-barrel carburetors and a lot of hoses going back and forth across the engine, and it was the fastest thing I ever seen. And that car wouldn't run good till it got over 100 miles an hour.
Arguments broke out over who had the fastest car. On the weekends, instead of outrunning the law, bootleggers tried to outrun each other.
They cut a place out in the open field and started racing on Sundays. No grandstands, no ticket sales, and they started betting on, man, I know I got the best car. My car outrun your car. This was actually the beginning of stock car racing down south.
It wasn't long before bootleggers were joined at the track by farm boys and factory hands from all over the South. Suddenly, there was a new place to go after church on Sunday.
You got to remember the South, back in the 40s and 50s, the South was really a dull place. They were trying to eke a living out with tobacco fields and fight the boll weevils in the cotton fields. And the only place you could see any color at all was if you went down to the candy store, or if you went to a movie, or you went to a stock car race.
As a kid selling soda in the stands of the old Charlotte Speedway, Humpy Wheeler knew he was hooked.
As soon as I got out of University of South Carolina, the first thing I did was go lease a quarter-mile dirt red clay speedway, and it was a gunfight at Oak Cake Corral every Friday night.
A guy that was real hungry would do anything to win one of those races in the early years. They would take you and get beside you in a turn and wouldn't turn, and you'd have to keep going straight and knock you out of the race.
Tim Flock fought his way through the rough and tumble world of stock car racing better than most, winning 40 Grand National races.
I'd say 8 out of 10 races, there'd be some kind of fight or some kind of argument.
I used to pay the drivers off. I had a 55 Chevrolet, and I would have the cash in the front seat. I'd be sitting there, and we'd have the cash between myself and my brother. He had a long-nosed revolver sitting up there on the dashboard that everybody could see. And when the drivers would come up to the window, we'd roll the window down about that much, and the guy would say get $500 for winning the race. We'd stick it out through that window. And if we didn't like what they were doing out there, we just cranked the car up and took off. And they looked at you, if you were running a racetrack back in those days, like you were just really needed to almost be in jail.
When people realized that I had married a race driver, it was a look of, you poor thing. People, I think, more or less put us in the category of carnivals.
We had a tough time in those days getting any publicity because we were kind of a black sport and we weren't sticking ball. And the sports editor, he liked golf or college football and racing, if we got 2 paragraphs, we were lucky. So we had to come up with crazy stuff, crazy ideas.
One publicity stunt was to put a woman behind the wheel. Her name